Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Andrew Stott, I'm the Emperor of Stomaria, and today we're continuing our series on how to start a micronation by discussing micronational currency. So if there's one thing that people know Stomaria for, it's our commitment to the accumulation and use of sound money and our opposition to fiat currency. And in order to talk about micronational currency, we first have to delve into the question of what is money, what is currency, and why are they different, and then how does micronational currency fit into that. So before we get started into into micronational currency, we'll first have to talk about differences between sound money and fiat currency on a macronational level. So a currency like the pound, the dollar, the euro, the yen, all macronational currencies are the same. They are a medium of exchange, they're a unit of account, they're portable, they're divisible, they're durable, they're fungible, which means interchangeable, but they all lack the fundamental quality which makes sound money, which is they don't act as a store of value for long periods of time. And the reason they don't act as stores of value is because more and more of the respective currencies are being created out of thin air on a daily basis. So something that cost, say in the UK, for example, 70 years ago, you could buy a house of £5,000. Today, you obviously can't, and in another 70 years, it won't be enough to buy a pack of gum. And this isn't because the price of gum or the house or whatever else is increasing, it's because more and more currency is entering the market. It's been thrown into the existing circulating supply. And so that's when inflation happens. People think inflation is when prices rise, but that's not what inflation is. Prices rising is a consequence of inflation, which is where governments and banks are creating more and more currency, adding it to the circulating supply, and all that the rises in price are doing is trying to counter that. It's trying to take into account and absorb these excess currency. And that's why you're constantly seeing, over time, you might not see it on a day-to-day basis, but over the course of several months, several years, several decades, you will absolutely notice the rapid increase in prices of everything, purely because more and more currency keeps getting added to the circulated supply by governments, by banks and other institutions. And this is a global phenomenon. And this is what people keep talking about when they're talking about global crashes, hyperinflation, where, you've seen it, many times throughout history. No currency has ever stood the test of time because it can't. It's a literal impossibility. It's an inevitability that the dollar, the pound, the euro, they will all eventually be worth nothing. It'll go the way that all other currencies in history have, and some macronational currencies are currently experiencing exactly this. I mean, you go to, Zimbabwe, or you go to, Argentina, or, Venezuela, or something. Inflation and hyperinflation decimate people's wealth. If you had £10,000, excuse me, if you had £10,000 worth of savings in the 1950s, for example, in the UK, you would probably be doing pretty well for yourself. But if you had £10,000 left there and you waited until this point today, that £10,000 is not going to buy you a fraction of what it would back then. And that's because your savings aren't going anywhere. They're not increasing in value. I mean, they might increase by 0.5% if the bank is lucky enough to give you that in interest, and they'll say be grateful for that. But the reality is, anyone keeping them wealth in savings in currency, it's an inevitable loss that they'll be making. It's just the undisputable reality of the world that we live in. So sound money, where does it get that store of value benchmark? Why is sound money? Why will sound money act as a store of value? And there are a few caveats to this, but the most simple answer is that sound money has to have all of the qualities, the characteristics of a currency, but it must also have a tangible worth and a limited supply. So something that banks, institutions, governments, they can't create it out of thin air. And this is why throughout the virtual entirety of human history, bar the last few hundred years, precious metals in particular, such as gold and silver, they have been used for sound as a form of sound money for literally thousands of years, because people understand, appreciate that these are things that are rare and desirable for other people. It has a tangible worth, and that's limited in supply, something that can't be sort of created out of thin air. There has been times in history where governments have tried to effectively turn gold and silver monetary systems into fiat currency systems by diluting the quality of the coins that they issued. So, for example, they would take a gold coin, throw it into a melting pot, add some copper, and suddenly you have 2 gold coins, but there's only half as much gold in each of them. You see what I mean? And then it sort of gradually sort of becomes less and less value because there's less and less gold content. And before you know it, it's just a pure copper coin. But people, they expect people just to accept the face value of it. And this is the problem that we have in society today. It's because people look at currency. They look at, digits on a screen, or, pound notes or dollar bills or wherever you might be in the world. And they think that is wealth. But that is not wealth. That was only ever supposed to be a claim check. That was only supposed to be a way of going, this £20 note guarantees me £20 worth of gold or silver or something like that. That is the way that they move from a monetary system based on sound money, the literal use of gold and silver, to a system where you could issue fiat currency, and the government or the banks, they would hold gold or silver, and if you wanted to, you could slap down your fiat currency and take that equivalent amount of gold and silver out. So it had a 1-to-1 ratio, I suppose is the best way I can describe it at the moment. But then, it's a bit of a long-winded history. I won't go into the ins and outs of it, but the bottom line is that you can't go to a bank now and put fiat currency on the table and ask for gold and silver, because they won't do it. They can't do it. It's not it's not the done thing. So you are stuck with this paper or digits on a screen in your bank account, almost completely oblivious to the fact that you have nothing. I mean, if the government decided to inflate away the value of the savings in your bank account, you wouldn't have a leg to stand on. And this is why people turn to sound money like gold and silver, because because it is limited in supply, because it is something that has a tangible worth to it. And this has always been, that's not always been it. For the last 4 or 5 years, it's been something that I've always been very interested in monetary systems, because you can do whatever you want with your society, with your civilization, with your nation, whatever it might be. But if you don't have a stable monetary system, you've got nothing. Because sooner or later, that society, that civilization, that nation, it will collapse. And everything that you might have accomplished, be it in terms of renewable energy or human rights or whatever else, that will all be for nothing if you don't have a stable monetary system to maintain your civilization or your society or your nation. And so it's always been, it's just one of those things. In recent times, it's becoming more and more critical, not just for micronations to consider, but for macronations to consider what the alternative is to a fiat currency world. Because sooner or later, it might be 10 years, it might be 50 years, it might be 100 years, but sooner or later, it will come crashing down, because it is inevitable that it will come crashing down. It's just a simple fact. And this is why Stomaria has taken it upon itself to try to educate through the micronational community, through micronationalism, try to educate as many people as possible about the importance of sound money. And so when I see people posting updates about their micronational currency, this is, micronational currency is infinitely worse than macronational fiat currency, purely because micronational fiat currency doesn't have any kind of value to start with. No one would accept micronational currency in terms of payment for an honest day's work. And I think the benchmark you should do is, if you are issuing a currency or your version of money or whatever it may be, you have to honestly ask yourself, would I work for the rest of my life for this currency or this version of money? Because if the answer is no, if the money or currency you're printing out, at home, like it's got A4 pieces of paper, you're putting them through the printer, you're printing out all of these notes, would you honestly work every day of your life, of your working life, and get paid in that? Because if the answer is no, then what's the point? I can honestly say yes. If someone said to me, come work for me and I will pay you in gold, I would be like, yeah, that's fine. Because I know that gold has value. I don't need to rely on someone else believing it has value. I know it has value because it is it's limited in supply, because it's desirable. It's a desirable metal and it's a useful metal. Silver too. It's a useful and desirable metal for obviously jewelry and things, but it's also an industrial metal. It's used in all sorts of in your mobile phone, in your tablet, in your TV. It's even in I didn't recall it being used in bandages in small amounts. It's a useful and rare commodity. And so yes, I would absolutely have no problem with being paid in things like gold and silver. I absolutely have a problem with being paid in micronational currency, partly because I know the micronations that issue currency either sell them as like a souvenir as opposed to actually wanting to establish a monetary system, but those claiming to want to establish a monetary system using micronational currency clearly don't understand the differences between currency and money. And that just strikes me as quite alarming, because you have all of this information available to you, and despite knowing exactly how a currency works and why it's going to be a long-term failure, or in micronational currency terms probably an immediate failure, you still persist in trying to go down the micronational currency route because, I don't know, because you want your face on a note, I guess? I don't know. But if you want a genuine monetary system which creates stability and sustainability for your micronation and for the other micronations that you associate or engage in trade with or whatever it may be, then you have to think about these things in terms of, what kind of sound money do I want to use? Where do I want to place my wealth? Where do I want other people's wealth to be placed, where I would be confident in preserving that long into the future? I don't mean like it's a guarantee to make you money, in the sense that, gold and silver and like everything else, they do rise and fall in value in dollar terms, in fiat currency terms from time to time. If you bought, gold a few months ago at, $2,000 or where it might be, you would currently be down. But I can guarantee you, there's not many guarantees in this world, but I can guarantee you that in 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 years time, wherever it might be, the gold that you bought now in dollar terms will be worth infinitely more than it is now. I mean, it's sooner or later, a single 1 ounce gold coin will be worth $1 million. That's the inevitability of currency and hyperinflation. It's going to happen. Possibly in our lifetimes, but certainly, certainly sooner rather than later. So again, this is just something for micronational leaders to think about, and think about carefully, because if you are serious about creating a genuine monetary system for your micronation, if you're serious about developing a micronation which has the best qualities of an actual nation, either a modern macronation or in nations in times past, then you really need to think about monetary systems, because without a sound, stable and sustainable monetary policy, without a monetary system, you will not stand the test of time. It's as simple as that. Now, even though I am very passionate about this subject, there are people out there who can explain all this a lot clearer than I can. So I would encourage you to go out there, either on YouTube or elsewhere, and do some more research on this subject. It's not a secret, it's not something that's been hidden from you, it's one of those hidden in plain sight sort of topics. But if you are serious about establishing what I would define as a genuine micronation, then you will need a genuine monetary policy, and that monetary policy must have sound money at its core. Because as I've just explained, going down the route of fiat currency or micronational fiat currency will inevitably lead to failure, regardless of what else you try to do with your micronation. So that is just something to think about going forward. So I think that is about it. So if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to give it a like, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and I'll catch you on the next one.